through the clouds, serving God in community. Welcome back to the podcast, and if you're new, welcome. I hope you're going to enjoy this episode and any previous episodes that you've seen. Let's just dive right into it. So today's theme is answering God's call to love and serve others in community. My opener for this episode is: serving others is at the heart of our calling as Christians. However, in a world focused on individualism and materialism, it can be easy to overlook the importance of living in community and serving together. Today, we'll dive into what it means to serve others, how our community can sharpen us, and why answering God's call to serve is essential to our faith. Our topics to cover today are the biblical call to serve, which is going to be from Mark 45, the role of community in our growth, which is Hebrews 10:24 through 25, and then thirdly and lastly, practical ways to serve those around us. And then, of course, in addition to that, we will also have a few questions and, things related to Scripture. So our first topic is the Bible calling us to serve. Starting off, Mark 10:45 states, "For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." So this in itself is a direct example of Jesus's sacrifice for us, for us sinful people, and that he did not come to be served. He came to serve. So it really kind of gives us a picture of leadership. Jesus, our Savior, our King, chose a life of serving others over being served. He didn't come to sit on a throne or demand honor, make us bow down to him and do his bidding. Instead, he came to meet people in their need. And that totally changes how people should be defining greatness. It's not about the titles or the applause, or in a modern day scenario, likes, follows, how much money you have. But it's about compassion in action. When we serve, we're stepping into the very heartbeat of Jesus in his ministry. And in doing so, we reflect his love in a world that desperately needs it. So this verse, reminds us that Jesus' example flips, what our expectations should be of the world. And serving becomes a calling and not a task or just something you have to do. And every time that we choose someone else's needs over our own comfort, we are directly echoing his example in, the best way possible. For an example of this, in your relationships, instead of expecting your partner, your friends, your coworkers, whatever, to always, meet your needs, the question to ask yourself is, how can I serve them today? And that might be listening more than speaking, forgiving quickly, or doing something kind without being asked or expecting anything in return for it. Additionally to that, at home or at school, you can serve by being the one that lifts other people up. Stay behind to clean up a teacher's classroom or help a colleague with a project that they're working on without even needing credit for it or anything. Or even, again, work or school, mentoring someone who's new and helping them get acclimated to this new environment and really just being a guiding hand for them. Jesus was never concerned with his titles. He was concerned with the people, his people, and helping them. Now, this next one might strike a nerve with a few people, but, at home, you can do a couple more chores, whether it's folding the laundry that nobody wants to fold, or in a adult perspective, being patient with your kids, or preparing a meal for your spouse after a long day. A couple other examples are maybe keeping your room tidy. Maybe if you have a roommate or you live with people who need to either be in the shared room or shared space, and keeping that area, cleanly out of respect for them. If you, this was a big thing in my house at least. If I took longer to eat than I did than my parents, I had to wash the dish myself. And and my mom would get mad if I took my plate and I just set it in the sink and then I walked away, and she would like full government name me. She'd like, Meredith L., what are you doing? I'm like, what? She was like, I know you didn't just put that in the sink. She was like, I need you to wash that and put it in the dishwasher. I was like, I mean, I guess. But it's things like that. She shouldn't have to ask me to put my dirty plate into the dishwasher if the dishwasher is clean. Like, she's not asking me to hand scrub it and make it sparkling clean and then dry it and put it up. She's literally just asking me to put it in the dishwasher. And my mom listening right now is definitely like, yes, I won. She's going to put her dishes away. I said I was going to try. So, keep that in mind. But it's the things like that at home. Like, it's the little things that can make someone else's life easier that you do when they either, aren't expecting it and you're not expecting anything in return for it. It's serving, making someone happy, making, their life easier. And then in the community, volunteering at places that are like overlooked, such as homeless shelters or food banks or nursing homes, or hey, even the Humane Society. Be the hands and feet of Christ to people who, might never step inside of a church. An example currently is that I'm in Arkansas for school, right? And if anybody's been paying attention to the weather in the past 2 weeks, we have been through a lot of weather fiascos. Tornadoes, flying debris, all sorts of stuff. We had flash floods. There are still places that are like heavily flooded in Arkansas, and like you cannot drive on those roads. And I mean, even in Texas as well, like, like there was a dam in East Texas that like broke and like swept cows away and like farmland and everything. I got off topic. So, the Humane Society in Arkadelphia recently made a Facebook post about how their facility, got flooded because of the excessive amount of rain that, we had to deal with. And so, obviously you can see how important it is to have a working facility, no matter what you are, but especially for a facility that is trying to help and aid, animals that do not have loving homes. So they reached out and they were like, hey, if y'all can, you have time, or maybe you need hours, it would be really great if we had people help with our cleanup, because we're really, we're struggling with cleanup and we're wanting to get our facility back going and everything. And I'm actually going to be doing that this week, just to help out, whenever I have time later in the day, I'm going to go and help them clean up and, get all those sweet little babies back in their temporary homes so that people can come and put them in their forever homes. But it's things like that where maybe you wouldn't even think about it. You're like, wow, I didn't even think that like that business could be flooded. Or they weren't having an issue with this like at the time. And, it's something you never think of. And so as believers and children of God, we need to start thinking about those people and start thinking about those businesses and those who need our help, and then turn to serve them without expecting anything in return. And finally, for that, another thing is in your attitude. is a good example. So the verse is just as much about how we serve as it is what we do to serve. So if you're approaching every task with humility, joy, and a willingness to be last, that is the Jesus way. It pulls back to the question I asked last episode, is what am I gaining from this, or who is gaining from this? It's like, I may not be gaining anything from this, and that's okay, but I'm helping somebody else. And I think it's a good mentality to have. It's a good selfless, Christ-like mentality to maybe not think, what am I going to gain from this, but what am I going to help others gain from this? My next point is the role of community in our growth. So the verse for this is Hebrews 10:24 through 25. And this one says, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up, meeting together as some who are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. And all the more as you see the day approaching." So, faith, I mentioned this last episode, faith wasn't meant to be lived in isolation. This verse reminds us that we grow best when we grow together. And we need encouragement, and we need accountability, and people who will nudge us towards love. God designed community to be a place of sharpening, support, and shared joy. And when we gather, we remind each other of truth. And when we serve together, we reflect the unity of Christ's body. And community is just more than attendance. It's about an intentional connection. When we choose to show up for others, we create a space where faith thrives and, love multiplies. And, I explained a few of these, again, in the last episode about making gathering a priority, whether it's a Sunday service, a small group, a one-on-one coffee with a fellow believer. But it's also about prioritizing showing up, even when your life gets super hectic and busy. Your presence will matter more to people than you will ever realize. Additionally, encouraging someone intentionally by sending a text or writing a note or saying some sort of kind word that, helps them, you are truly speaking life, encouragement, and, even accountability into someone's faith journey. And you don't have to wait until someone is struggling in their journey to say something to them to, keep them going on a proactive path. This verse calls us to community that is intentional, not accidental or just something that happens. Moving on to my third point, practical ways to serve those around us. So it doesn't have to be grand or public. And honestly, the most impactful acts that you can do are, the small personal ones done out of love. And, we tend to overthink it and we have to do this big thing. We have to do it at the right time. There needs to be this opportunity. But in reality, God calls us to serve every single day in the spaces that we already live in. And it's not about doing everything. It's about doing something, like I said, with intention. So, a few examples that I've, come up with are cooking a meal for a sick friend, a new parent, or, someone who's just had a hard week. A good homemade hot or cold meal really says to someone that I love you, you're seen, I care for you. And it's really going to impact them far more than you could think. Another example is volunteering at the local shelter, like I mentioned, or the food pantry, or your old school, or your kids' school, or an event at the church that you go to. 1 hour of your time can really lighten someone's load and open a door for connection and community. You know, another one for like community and helping out those who don't have a lot of people is offering to babysit or run an errand for, like a single parent. Or honestly, just a busy family. Something that could feel, super simple to you, but is like a really big blessing for them. Back home, I have a really good friend of mine, fellow Ginger, that has the most amazing 2 kids. Love them to death. They're super sweet, brother and sister, and I babysat them a few times here and there whenever, she needed to do whatever. And, I loved doing it. They were fun. It didn't matter if I was at their house. It didn't matter if I was at my house. It was fun to, spend time with them. And then it was also good to know that I was giving her a chance to do whatever she needed to do. And, through that, I, got to know her kids. And, honestly, it really opened me up to the idea of having kids. Because truly before that, I was kind of deterred from having kids because I didn't think that I was going to be a good mom, be able to, give my kids what they needed or anything like that. And so babysitting them and getting to know her kids, it really helped me and showed me that, one, I'm not giving myself enough credit for the connection I do have with kids. And 2, the thing that everyone thinks, it's like, wow, their kids are so great, so, what if I have 1 or 2 of my own? Not saying I'm going to have 1 or 2 of my own in any near future, because I have other things to do currently, like graduate college, and get married, and get a job, an adult job. But it's just the fact that my helping her and giving her some relief throughout her day opened my eyes to something that I closed myself off from. And then it built a connection between me and her kids, and then a connection between me and her. She is one of my absolute, most favorite, people of all time. Truly. She's awesome, she's super sweet, and she's, I don't know, she's just awesome. I'm, totally gassing her up right now. But I love her. She's so talented, and she really is a excellent example of what God calls us to be, in the sense of serving, loving, being gentle, and building community with people, even if she doesn't realize that she's doing it. And then a final example that I wanted to talk about is what I'm calling in-between moments. And as I mentioned earlier, God calls us to serve every day in the spaces that we already live in. And so the in-between moments are looking for needs in people, just super small things that are, can, help people out a little bit. So, holding the door for someone, if it's, for any reason, truly. It doesn't have to be raining or bad weather of any sort. Just turning around, seeing if somebody's behind you, and then holding the door for them. Another is connected to service or retail workers. Speak kindly to the cashier or the workers there. The people who are helping you purchase whatever, or the people who are making you your food or drink. And then noticing somebody who is sitting alone at school, school lunch, or at church, or anywhere. truly. And if you know them a little bit, it might be a bit easier for you to approach them and possibly sit with them or, talk to them. And as someone, especially recently actually, I was having a rough day and I went to Waffle House by myself just to get some food and, I don't know, think maybe. And there was an elderly couple sitting at a booth over from me. And I wasn't talking to anybody other than my waitress, just minding myself, eating my food. I think I was watching a TV show on my phone. And the older woman, when they were leaving, she walks her walker over to me. And she kind of sits down, but not fully sits down across from me. And she just kind of looked at me and she was like, "Honey, you look kind of sad." And I was like, "Oh no, I'm okay. I'm just here to get, some food and some clarity and everything like that." And it was so sweet. And she just kind of she tilts her head at me and she was like, "Well, I'll be praying for you and I hope that you have a good night." And then her and her husband walked away and left. And I truly cannot explain the presence of God that I felt in that moment, because I didn't know this woman. I had never seen this woman before. I had no relation to her. We were complete and utter strangers. But something pushed her to walk over to me and tell me that, she was going to pray for me. And, that she hoped I had a good day. And I was just like, okay, yeah, he's still here. He's still very much present in my life. I'm having a rough time, but he just sent this woman to remind me that, hey, I'm still here. You still got me. And it was such a Jesus moment, and it really did help me. And it really boosted me. Which is why I'm, really emphasizing this point, in that in these in-between moments, you can do something so simple and boost someone more than you can ever know. I don't know if that woman, thinks about me the way that I think about her, but I'm never going to forget that interaction. And I hope that the interactions that are similar to that I give to other people, I hope that they think about me. And hopefully I gave them a Jesus moment of the sort. It really is something that we all need to, do a little bit more. Here I am, Lord, use me. Send me to where I need to go. Let me help whoever. Because service is never, it's never scheduled. It's a lifestyle to being open and willing to love others in whatever way that they need, even if you don't know what they need. On to my conversation starters, or, my questions. Pulling back to the first verse that I mentioned today, which was Mark 45, which is, "Even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve." Personally, how does, this shape your perspective on service and how you should, go about it? And, I mentioned it earlier in that it should flip the script on what we, view as service, or think what greatness looks like. Because, Jesus, God in the flesh, didn't seek attention or, acolytes or people to, bow down at his feet. He had disciples and he had people that he was teaching and bringing along with him, but, he washed feet. He washed their feet. He healed them. He fed them. He listened to them. And then ultimately he gave his life for them, for us. So if we're following him, shouldn't our lives, reflect the same posture of humility and love? And, that's how I think about it, at least. My second question is, what is a time when you were served by someone else in a way that helped you and or deepened your faith? Personally, my senior year in high school, around Christmas time, my my best friend, very good friend of mine, she passed away, partially at the hands of herself and partially at the hands of another. And it was extremely hard for me, because it was, one of the first times that I had truly experienced loss like that. And of course, in that moment, I didn't understand it, and I couldn't. It was just so difficult for me to come to terms with that a life was gone, a person that I loved was gone. And I, remember praying about it and just questioning it. I was like, why? Why did this happen? Why did you let her do that? And I was angry, and I was I was filled with grief, and it was just a really difficult time for me for a while. It still chokes me up a little bit to talk about it, but I kind of removed myself from situations or things that previously gave me joy, or things with my friends. And a thing that happened about a week after we had gotten the news that she had passed. I had a moment in school where the principal and vice principal or counselor of some sort had to come in and make an announcement about it and say that, if anybody needed anything from the counseling services, that their doors were open and everything like that. And she was in that class with us, or was. And it hit me really hard in that moment, so I had to excuse myself from the room, and I went to the restroom, and I kind of lost my cool a little bit, and I was very upset, and I was having a very vulnerable moment. And a friend of mine, followed me, and she was, talking with me and, just kind of letting me cry and everything. And then the teacher of that class, she came to the restroom where I was, and she hugged me. And she told me that, God loves all of his people, and that there was a reason that it happened. And while we may never understand that reason, he has a plan, and he has his way. And she hugged me, and then she said a few words over me, and then she was like, you do what you need to do, take your time, and, come back if you can, and if you can't, that's okay too. Like, to her class and everything. And again, in that moment, it was so difficult for me to come to terms with anything that was happening during that week, or honestly for me to care about anything other than that. And to have a woman that I'd known all year, that had been my teacher, a mentor of mine, even a friend of my mother's, and to have her sit with me during a vulnerable moment and connect with me on a spiritual level, it really, that deepened my faith. Because while I was upset at the loss of my friend, and I didn't understand it, her saying that to me really let me know that, what happened has happened, and there was a reason to it. And, it's still very difficult for me to, talk about it or discuss how my life was for a, a long time after that. But now looking back at it, and in the moment I can feel it too. Having my teacher, that woman, the wonderful woman, come to me and hold me like that was essentially how I view it. God coming and hugging me and being like, it is okay. This was supposed to happen. This was, it's okay. You'll be okay. It's gonna hurt and you're allowed to hurt, but you're gonna be okay. And even still, the pain doesn't subside, and guilt and grief can really creep up on you all the time. But it was an important moment for me, and it shifted the way that I thought about the circumstances a little bit. It didn't stop my pain, but it just reminded me that I wasn't alone in it. And I'm still not alone in that pain, truly. Because, I still feel her. I still feel her love. And I still feel God's love. And when I have those moments, it's like I have to remind myself, I have to ground myself, and it's like, I'm okay. This is okay. He is with me. And, I will never forget her, truly. And I will never forget everything that she ever did for me. Even so, I have you can't see it right now if you're watching me because I have a jacket on, but I have a tattoo on my upper forearm that is an olive branch with the years that she lived. And I chose the olive branch because, in the Bible, the olive branch, specific to Genesis and the flood, olive branch is symbolizing peace and hope and renewal, and it's supposed to be representing a new beginning for humanity. And I chose the olive branch because of peace. And while my sweet friend didn't have peace while she was with us, I like to think that she has peace now. So that's why I chose the olive branch. Continuing on to our next question, in a little bit more of a brighter note, how does your community or church play a role in helping you answer God's call to serve? I have two examples for these because both my school and my church are very involved in serving. My church back home, we do something called The Gift. And there are a bunch of projects going on at once, and it's like this whole day of things. And specifically, the one that I had done for like ever with either my mother or my father was like food packing. So we would have like 4 or 5 different types of beans, or like noodles, or like these little packets of seasoning that we would like measure out and scoop and then put in these bags and then seal the bags and then put those in boxes and then seal those boxes. And it got sent off to less fortunate areas that, needed food and needed an easy meal. And so my church does that every year. And then, there are plenty of other things too that my church does. Like they do mission trips to lower income areas, either out of the state or out of the country. And, build houses for them and evangelize and really just like embody the serving that the Bible calls us to do. And then my school, it's a Christian school. And so we have, I believe 2 times a year, we call it Tiger Serve Day, where we get assigned either indoor or outdoor projects to go and help people in our community, so in Arkadelphia. And The first time that I did it, I went to a former professor's house. He used to teach here. I never had him. He was before my time. But he used to teach here. And he was telling us that ever since his wife had passed, he had been having difficulty with managing their front, side, and backyard, plus a little greenhouse area. So, of course, we were more than happy to help him, and we pulled weeds, put in new mulch and dirt. We cut overgrown tree branches and hedges. We swept where it needed to be swept on the porch, and we just got rid of all the the things that he was having difficulty getting rid of. And let me tell you, we did a bang up job. We did pretty dang good. That greenhouse, you would not have been able to get in that door previously. You can very much get in that door now. The side of his house, the front of his house, and the back of his house, the backyards and everything, the flower beds, they all looked great. And, it was 4 to 5 hours of service for 12 to 15 of us. So it wasn't that big of a project, and it didn't take that much time or labor. But we impacted him a lot. He was so grateful. He was brought to tears at us helping him and us being gracious with him and not judging him in his moment of need. And I think about him quite often, actually. But it's things like that where that and the gift where my community, my church really helped me play a role in answering my call to serve, because I might not necessarily know where to volunteer, just in everyday life. And so those two outlets have really helped me give back to those who need it and, help me create memories to think back on. So a few more verses that I would like to reference and for this episode. Romans 12:4-5 says that just as body has many parts with different functions, so too are believers in Christ a unified body, each member with a unique role and belonging to all others. So this verse is giving us a really powerful picture of, what it means to belong. In the body of Christ, no one is unnecessary. And, you may not sing on stage or, preach or, anything like that. But your presence, your gifts, your heart is what matters. And just like, a body needs every organ to function well, the church will always need you. And then when you serve in your unique way, the whole body becomes, stronger. We shouldn't be competing with one another. We are completing one another. The next verse that I pulled for this episode is Philippians 2:4. And it says, "Not looking to your own interests, but each of you to interests of the others." And I think this verse really can challenge us as believers and change our default mode of living. It's really easy for us to focus on our to-do lists or stay in our comfort zones and focus on our struggles. But in this particular verse, Paul is, inviting us to live with open eyes and open hands. And, he's saying, pay attention, care about others, step in where others might step back. When we begin to look out for one another, not out of obligation, but, out of love, we are, again, mirroring the selfless love of Christ. The last verse that I pulled for this episode is 1 Peter 4:10, which says, "As each one has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace." And in essence, it's encouraging believers to, use their gifts and talents to serve and help others, and acting, like it said, as responsible stewards to God's diverse gifts that He has gifted to you. And, you were given your gifts for a reason, not to hoard or hide, but to serve. And God's grace, shows up in all kinds of forms, like encouragement, compassion, leadership, creativity. And, each one of those is a tool for loving each other, loving others. And, when you use what you've been given, you become a living expression of the grace of God. You're not doing regular mundane task. You are participating in, this divine purpose that has been given to us, and this call as believers that we were supposed to respond to. It's, your gifts are sacred, and they're not about, the spotlight. They're, again, pulling to the verse, they're about stewardship. And if you use them faithfully, then you will reflect the beauty of God. So as we wrap up today's episode, we need to remember as believers that serving is not just a Sunday thing, and that it's a lifestyle. It starts with small, faithful steps, like an open hand, a kind word, a listening ear to anybody who needs it. And, Jesus showed us that way, and now we get the opportunity as people to follow Him together. So, whether you're serving on stage or behind the scenes, you are making a kingdom impact. So just keep showing up with love. Yep. And, that's all I have for y'all today. I hope y'all enjoyed this episode. This was probably one of the more vulnerable episodes of this season, but I still enjoyed it. I always enjoy doing these. There will be one next week, per usual. And yeah, I love you. God loves you. And I will see y'all later. Bye.